Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome in. Happy Friday. This is Gorilla Sports Off Ice. I'm Jesse Montano. Meghan Angley is going to be joining me in just a second, driving us through today's show. But I do want to remind you guys about our great friends over at Trusted American Mortgage before we get started here. Look, Trusted American, they want to help you lower your interest rate, get a better monthly payment. And right now, they even do have a special offer for Gorilla Sports listeners. Go to trustedamerican.com/sports. See how much money they can help you start saving today. And they might even be able to help you not only lower that monthly payment, but get you a couple months without having to make your mortgage payment. How much would that help you out now in the summer months? Head on over, trustedamerican.com/sports. Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to a Friday edition of Off Ice. Meghan Angley, joined by Jesse Montano. Excited for a good deep dive into how the Florida Panthers built a championship caliber team, back-to-back seasons, and what the Avs can replicate. And I'm excited to kick off the show with some Avs news of the day because I think
Yeah.
it lends itself to this conversation in a couple different ways. But it appears this town is not big enough for two Taves. What
Yeah.
are your thoughts on Jonathan Taves heading to Winnipeg? I know at the end of the day, it appeared the sweepstakes for Jonathan Taves was narrowed down to Colorado and Winnipeg. Did the Avs win out or lose out on the Taves sweepstakes?
Megan, we talked the other day about this, and I said, if you're going to bring him in, league minimum, see where this guy's at. I think he could be a really nice piece in the bottom part of your lineup. Winnipeg Jets gave him $2 million for 1 year. With all due respect to Jonathan Taves, and maybe he'll make me eat these words with his performance this year, at $2 million for one season, Megan, the Avs won by not having Jonathan Taves land in Colorado. And my guess is that was probably the deciding factor, is that the Jets were willing to give him money that the Avs probably weren't. So at that price point, I am more than okay to see him land somewhere other than Colorado. But I would be fibbing to you if I told you that I wasn't intrigued by what Jonathan Taves could have brought to the Avalanche and their bottom six in leadership and experience and all that stuff. But $2 million, thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah, I am pretty solidly in the Avs won out on this not working out. I started to feel more and more each passing day that they would be kind of blowing up their roster to accommodate this player. And there are certain types of players that you move mountains for. And Jonathan Taves, in a year which he'll turn 38 and has missed significant time, I'm not sure the version of this player that you're even getting going into next year. But what ultimately solidified this for me was the murmurs around, okay, well, this probably ensures that Charlie Coyle wouldn't make very much sense for the 3C. And I started to think about the premium that they paid just to get Charlie Coyle in Colorado. And they're certainly paying him good money to be a third line center. But I think it was Ross Colton who described Coyle as a luxury to have as an option for a third line center, because there is so much more reliability in what he brings. And what lends itself to the Florida conversation so well is the significance of a third line and how the construction of that third line can be a difference maker in a Stanley Cup final. And I think that Florida proved the importance of bolstering their third line with a good mix of talent and guys who play very hard. And Charlie Coyle is just one piece in that. But it's clear after these last playoffs, the Avs have not figured out their third line. I talked about the point of emphasis in finding talented wingers to complement a Charlie Coyle. And what would be concerning is they take this swing on Jonathan Taves, for example, at 3C, and it doesn't pan out. Let's say it's even league minimum. So it's low risk in terms of that cost. But the cost to replace him at the deadline is yet again where they will be paying a premium, draft capital, B grade, C grade prospects. And they've already just done this to bring about Charlie Coyle. I would be so frustrated if we found ourselves at yet another deadline paying a premium for a position that they just solved last season. And they already paid a significant price for him. I don't want that to enter sunk cost territory, but with everything you've done to get Charlie Coyle here, that would have frustrated me more. And they're already taking a lot of risks around the lineup. You know, the longevity of Gabriel Landeskog is important. They still might need to address the top six if Jonathan Drouin is not in that picture. It just felt like you're going to be creating the possibility for more problems with way too little certainty. I feel they won out in going this direction.
And I believe you mentioned it earlier this week, but like the Charlie Coyle stuff, like you paid the premium you did because he had term,
right?
1 extra year, but it wasn't a straight rental. That was why you paid a little bit more. So I'm with you. Like it would have felt silly and like a real indictment on asset management of like, well, then why did you do that? If you were just going to go out and sign this guy that you suddenly don't really know what he's going to be. Look, I think Gabe Landeskog, kind of proved a little bit like there is an element for these guys of, like riding a bike where like you never really lose it.
Zach Parise just recently, I thought he came back in great shape.
Absolutely.
And I really enjoyed his short stint with the Avs.
Zach Parise, that's another great call. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm thinking that Jonathan Toews is going to show up and be a bum. Like, I think he's going to be an effective player. It's why when we talked about it earlier in the week, I was like, yeah, I think he would be a fun fit there. But you know what you're going to get in Charlie Coyle. You maybe didn't love what you got in the playoffs. And hey, that's a reality. I'm not going to try to say that didn't happen or whatever, but like he played well for you in the regular season. He's got a massive body of work that says he is going to be an above average third line center, is going to really provide great value for you in that spot. As you really kind of argued earlier this week, you weren't even arguing against Jonathan Toews. You're just like, I don't see the fit. Like, I don't see where it's like, yep, he comes in and you plug him in right there and it makes a ton of sense. It would have been what you alluded to. All right, maybe a Jack Drury or, okay, maybe he plays on the wing where Logan O'Connor is going to play later. But then, okay, well, now you're taking him out of the position he's played his whole career. Okay, you're going to move Charlie Coyle. Well, wow, that's now kind of a weird use of your assets. And yeah, you got a little bit cheaper, but I think that's a great call out that you just made, Megan, of like, now suddenly do you find yourself back in this room again, whether it be at the deadline or next summer where it's like, we don't really know what we're doing. And we've used assets and we've traded pieces and, all this and that. Or you could just keep Charlie Coyle and have a bit of a known quantity and cross the bridge of getting him re-signed next year when you get there. And I just, like I said, at $2 million, I'm with you. I think the Avs are come out better off in this situation. Had Jonathan Toews signed for league minimum in Winnipeg, I'd maybe be saying like, yep, that's a bummer. But at that dollar figure, I'm with you. I think you're better off just avoiding a potential headache.
Yeah, I think keep it simple, avoid creating unnecessary problems because there's still work to be done. Bama Metcalf in the chat mentions that there's still a possibility that Coyle would need to be moved, a Girard need to be moved for some of these holes in the lineup that we talked about that still need to be addressed, especially with Duran still unsigned. It's going to be a top six picture that's incomplete as of today. So there might be work to be done if Jonathan Drouin isn't going to sign in Colorado for another really team-friendly deal.
So you've got 1.2 as things sit right now. As you and I have discussed, you do have to get a couple more players under contract. Sam Malinsky is one of them. But lineup-wise, more or less, if the Avs had to go out and put a team on the ice tomorrow, they could. You've got 12 forwards under contract. You got 60 under contract. You got 2 goaltenders under contract. Work still needing to be done. I do wonder, Megan, if I do think Miles Wood is a guy they're going to really try to move this summer. I think that's a guy they're going to really try to move this summer. So, okay, there's 2.5. That gets you back up closer to $4 million. What can we do with this money right here? Because I believe Joe Sakic when he told us that year-end presser, like I want to run this team back.
Absolutely. He said that multiple times.
So like, I don't disagree with the comment that Bama Metcalf put in this team isn't done making moves. They can't be, but I do wonder, Megan, how much they try to tweak around the fringes instead of subtracting a piece like Sam Girard or a piece like Charlie Coyle. Is it a Miles Wood? And you know, depending on what you're doing, your bottom pair, I don't know. Like I'm not fully convinced yet that we are going to see one of these big core pieces move. I think they're going to be tempted to run it back. They really liked the team they had that lost in 7 to Dallas. They really liked that team. And I think they believe with a full year, we think this team could be really, really dangerous. I don't know. I think that they are posturing more towards we're going to try our hardest to keep it as close as we possibly can. And we're going to only make the adjustments we have to.
I think that's true. And so that kind of tees up the other Avs news of the day, some RFA business and getting Jason Polin and Matt Steinberg signed to 1-year deals, at least through next season. Those guys were up for new contracts. And I think with the injury to Logan O'Connor, he'll be recovering after this procedure that he's had for hips, that will leave an availability in the bottom 6 for perhaps an internal promotion at the start of the year. And someone like a Matt Steinberg or a Jason Polin, I could see vying for maybe that 4th line role. Maybe you elevate Parker Kelly temporarily on that 3rd line. And the reason I say this is going back to Miles Wood for a second, as I'm imagining what the 3rd line could look like opening night. There's a Charlie Coyle, there's a Ross Colton, and then there's maybe a Parker Kelly. And I'm weirdly omitting Miles Wood when I was doing this exercise in my brain earlier, because I just don't see how Miles Wood can make sense into next year. And so I think this is a player they inevitably have to move on from. And that's why I'm talking with Parker Kelly as the hypothetical player that maybe gets moved up, because he's spotted as a 3C for much of last season.
Right.
I think he can handle 3rd line responsibilities playing on the wing as needed until Logan O'Connor returns to health. And then maybe a player like Matt Steinberg, who I think really endeared himself to Jared Bednar in his, brief stint. I think that could be a player that starts the year with the Avs and gets a little bit of experience, gets some reps in, and a lot of valuable experience for growth too.
Well, and I think the hit that got him suspended, I think was a big learning lesson for him. I remember watching that play, and just as soon as he did it, I was like, I looked at it, I was like, what an idiot. Why did he do that? Like that was so obviously the wrong thing to do. That's obviously going to get you kicked out of it. But I think it came from a place of like, I want to be involved. I'm trying to generate some energy and hit somebody. And I think that was a great lesson in like, that in control, be in control, keep your arms down, keep your feet on the ice. There's a way to be effective and be an energy generator without going over the line.
Absolutely. I think that's a line too that he's learning to walk. His time in the American League is extremely valuable for that discipline that is required of him. Because I do think you're right. It was to make an impression. It's why he fought Zadorov. So kind of funny. But
and I want to give you some credit because you said on the pod, it was about a month ago, right after the Avs got eliminated, like you knew right away. The Avs actually did call up Matt Steinberg during that first round series against the Dallas Stars to serve that 2-game suspension. A lot of folks, including myself, didn't catch it because there's a lot of, black ace and, guys that travel with the team, things like that. So it didn't really occur to me, but you were on that immediately. You talked about it on the pod, like I said, about a month ago. So I
really appreciate that.
Make sure to give you your shout out on that because Matt Steinberg will be eligible to jump straight into the lineup because of the suspension that was served.
They hilariously did it game 2 when there was all the confusion around Landeskog and warm-ups, lineups, blah, blah, blah. He's in the lineup. Now he's a scratch. Now he's not. So they did it at the perfect time to disguise it.
Because Matt Steinberg was listed in the scratches, but none of us were. I wasn't registering to anybody because, to your point, we were keeping an eye on another part.
On the Landy news. Yeah. So, just a quick funny Steinberg note about his style of play and just how effective it is, because in the Abbotsford series, he came back in and I thought he was one of the best players on the ice in overtime in game 4. And it might have been game 3. Either way, one of the most effective players in whichever of those overtime games was in the middle of that series, and they didn't play him in game 5. And my friend, who's sort of new to hockey, she came to me after and she said, I noticed 36 wasn't on the ice. Was that maybe a reason why they didn't win in game 5? And I said, I think that's an astute observation because what he brings is so powerful. He was getting under Abbotsford's skin, but he was towing that line a lot more responsibly this time around. And he was bringing so much energy. And the way that he locked into like the puck skill component in that overtime period that I'm remembering, he's receiving passes from Matthew Phillips and finding seams. It was just an impressive combination of that battle and throwing the body around, finishing every check. But he had that skill too when that was a tight OT period. The pressure was really high. I really like what Matt Steinberg brings. So I'm excited for him to potentially get an opportunity coming out of camp.
I don't want to get ahead of you here because I know we're going to talk about the Panthers in a minute. I want to circle back to this comment here. He reminds me of one of the Panthers' fourth liners. And I want to circle back and I want to talk about AJ Greer and as it relates to Matt Steinberg.
Absolutely.
So, like I said, I don't want to jump ahead, but just remind me. I don't want to.
No, I love it because I wanted to talk about AJ Greer, his time in Colorado. I think some people could see like, wow, AJ Greer found success in Florida. Like, why couldn't the Avs have extracted that from him? And when we get to that point, I think we've got some interesting conversation around Greer.
Yeah, for sure.
But let's jump right in then to Florida and the conversation around some of the ingredients of this team that have helped them to build such a powerhouse year after year and what the Avs might be able to emulate.
Before we get into all of the business part of it, Chloe's editing a video right now. I did a video that'll be out here in just a little bit about this new tradition in the NHL that if you win the Stanley Cup, it is incumbent on you to party as hard and for as long as you can before you just, fall over. Or it's usually like you get to the parade and then everyone starts to kind of, but it has become like, can you party between winning and getting to the parade? And Megan, I just love it so much to see the way that these guys, like, I don't think there's a full understanding and appreciation for what these guys go through over the course of a season, and to get there and to win, to accomplish your goal. I love watching these guys just let everything loose for a week.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I just didn't know.
Like some of my favorite memories are Brad Marchand and photos that surfaced when he won the cup with Boston and just the hot mess express that was the way that he celebrated with the cup, that bar tab, that was insane, especially for its time. And I just think no one parties better than Brad Marchand, probably.
There was actually a video this morning of Alexander Barkov physically having to pull Brad Marchand out of the club, and they were outside and Marchie spins out of their hold and he's like trying to get back in. And there's like multiple Florida Panthers like, no, we are leaving. Like, we're getting out of here.
I love that because I'm not that. I'm a lightweight and I go home early. And I love people, though, who can party like there's no tomorrow, I guess.
So I told you I had a video for you that I just saw that I don't think you've seen. Here's a video from last night. Florida Panthers enjoying their Stanley Cup win.
I need you guys to understand, like, Evan Rodriguez in Colorado was just the sweetest.
He's one of my favorite people.
Little angelic, soft-spoken, kind-hearted man, great dad. And I remember seeing the switch up in him in his villain era, apparently, when it was warm-ups in Edmonton, or starting lineup announcements, and they were booing him, and he had this weird little grin on his face, and I was like, ew, what is that? Who are you? Like, what are you doing right now? And I love it, but this is crazy to me.
And then I don't know if it was before or after Kachuk grabbed the mic and said, McDavid who?
What?
And then threw the mic. Yeah, they're just like,
I didn't think This was a tense series. There
Yeah,
were
yeah.
a lot of emotions, but where I was, picking out the storylines of where these emotions were boiling over, it did not feel like McDavid was public enemy number one
No.
for Florida. That side of the series, obviously they had a lot of challenge containing him, but they made pretty solid work of doing it. It's crazy to me that that's the target of their ire, I guess.
Because AJ Greer started an F the Oilers chant at the Elbow Room a couple days before, and my first thought was like, oh, okay, this stems from it being such a tense series. There was so much hatred out there. But I saw that right before I came down here for the show, and I was like, damn!
They are on Edmonton's necks, too, from celebrating in the locker room to Pink Pony Club.
Oh, I know.
To now this. My goodness, was this maybe more personal than I thought it was?
Right. But yeah, they're enjoying themselves.
I've really enjoyed the Brad Marchand victory tour of going around his teammates and thanking each of their former teams.
Good.
Mr. Waivers, that one was really funny. And then I think a couple players, but I know Kachuk was one of them, thanked the Bruins for Brad Marchand.
And then did you see he was at a Dairy Queen today,
Aww.
wearing a Dairy Queen hat and a Dairy Queen t-shirt?
They're so unserious.
I know.
Hard. Some of this is really endearing. What was the other thing? Barkov bringing the cup to his neighbor
at 5
a.m. I can't help but find some of that a bit charming.
Well, and Paul Maurice had the line about his favorite part of being with the Panthers hasn't been the winning the cups. It's been seeing the way the team treats each other and the way that they lift each other up and all that. And you can just tell, and probably what's so angering about playing these guys is they do seem like they're just out there just having fun, just with their boys, and then they beat the shit out of you on the ice, and it's like, what the hell? So yeah, they're like I said, they're enjoying themselves, and I saw that video right before we came down, and I was like, holy cow, this is on another level.
Yeah,
right
that escalated
quickly.
Yeah, that escalated from what I thought. I think Paul Maurice is an interesting coach. I also love that Brad Marchand thanked the Jets for even the addition of Paul Maurice. It was really cute to see a coach in the mix for these all-around thanks. But
so sorry, we can get into the makeup of the team now. I just wanted to play
I'm going down
you.
several rabbit holes, but we can revisit the one I was about to go down when we get back to the fourth line and the AJ Greer conversation.
Yeah.
So put a pin in the fourth line. We're just too excited to talk about aspects of this Florida Panthers team. But this was an impressive run. I know back-to-back, maybe because of how well built they were, it just felt like an inevitable that this cup final is going to run through Florida no matter what. It was just a question of who's the opponent in the end. And I want to throw some respect on what Florida accomplished and how they made quick work of the cup final through Edmonton. Edmonton had to scratch and claw their way out of deficits nearly the whole series. And it was just heavy hitting, relentless, on their necks for the entirety of the series. They got the result that they deserved in winning the cup back-to-back.
It felt like Florida was in the driver's seat from even the first game. That Edmonton wins in overtime. They've got to come back and tie it and win late. It always felt like Florida was in control. It felt like the Oilers were chasing from every puck drop. And I saw, the meme of the horse that's really well drawn and super detailed at the back, and then it's finished really hastily up front. I saw someone that said this was the Stanley Cup final, because those games 1 through 4 was oh man, back and forth. Oh, the Oilers, they're never dead. And then 5 and 6 were yeah, this series is done. Florida's in control and they're just going to win.
I imagine you pointed out too, with the way the series went last year, that there's probably incentive for Florida to not let it get out of hand in that way and just put it to bed. And I think, 1 through 4, you look at the result, I'm sure there was frustration brewing for Florida because there were many moments, many games where they were the stronger team for the majority of these games, but they didn't always pull out the win. That I think that was great bulletin board material. I saw too, someone had mentioned that Edmonton had booked out a sushi restaurant reservation for after game 6, I believe. And Florida caught wind of this, and it made them, want to go out and
Mm-hmm.
just beat them that much more badly. And so I do think something I will point out, because how Florida starts games is really significant to them winning. And it's something that, in talking about what the Avs can emulate, we're always asking, well, does scoring first matter, drop of the puck, how much of a difference does this make? It makes a huge difference. Florida having the lead early and getting up on Edmonton, usually by 2 goals in every game, had a huge impact on the momentum of things. And they're 10-0 in games in which they score first, and it's a clinching game. And I think that's a really impressive stat that should hold a lot of significance when it comes to asking yourself the importance of being ready at the drop of the puck.
Well, and to me, it was one of those things that, like, it showed a sign of maturity in that group, or it was another underscore under how mature of a group that is, because we talked about it during the Dallas series with Colorado, and the importance of the Avs being able to get out to a lead, not just to have the lead, but to be able to start to dictate the way that the game was going to be played. And we talked about, well, if Dallas gets a lead, they can start to clamp things down, make things harder on you, slow the game down, play a grinding style. And that was what Florida did too. Florida was able to get to their game first every game in the Stanley Cup final. And then once they did that, it's like, yeah, good luck. This team is just too well oiled of a machine.
That feels cruel.
And I didn't even mean to do it. I didn't even mean to do it.
No, it's true, though, because one, the analytics reflect this, just like a top 5v5 Corsi 4 possession team, second in expected goals for. These were stats, too, that favored the Avs 5v5, and why I think there was so much frustration coming out of the series. To this day, when you look at the expected goals for, the Avs are a top team in what they were hoping to create based on the process and the number of attempts and quality of chances. And they just didn't get that result. Florida got results, and I think it's because not only getting to their game as quickly as they did, but sticking with it as consistently. So something I noticed about Florida is their readiness and their intensity after every faceoff. And so they were hungry and looking for scoring opportunities as soon as the puck was down. And I think this is where sometimes Edmonton got caught puck watching or a little bit flat-footed because they just weren't as ready. And I just imagine, in like rodeo settings where there's the rider behind and the bull is behind the pen. Like, that's what Florida's energy is like, is the bull behind the pen just restlessly ready at any given second.
Yeah,
and it's
really
intense.
Open at any moment.
Yes, no, exactly. That's the intensity that Florida has at any given second. And it's every player on the ice, every shift. And so that buy-in, I talked about the 5-man unit on the ice, any given shift is such a threat. And it's the way that they play hockey too. I think they're so aggressive on the forecheck. I love the forecheck, backcheck, paycheck that emerged. But it's true. Every player plays with that kind of commitment, and it helped them in so many scoring opportunities to force opportunities that weren't previously there by stripping Edmonton of the puck. It was strong play along the wall, and it was strong play between the blue lines, because even on exits for Florida, for Edmonton, they saw opportunity to just re-enter, and it made it hard then for Edmonton to get up off the mat.
Well, and it reminded me so much of, the Avs in 2022, the depth and the coming at you in waves. And I remember talking to my dad after game 1 of that cup final against the Lightning. And we were rewatching some of the goals back, and Val Nichushkin and Victor Hedman talked about this after the fact of, like, the Avs forecheck led by Val Nichushkin was so relentless.
Yes.
Victor Hedman was like, we did not have time to breathe. We were trying to reset, regroup, look up ice, and there was someone just in your hip pocket constantly forcing you to make a pass you didn't want to make, trying to reset and regroup, and then another wave would hit you. And that's what Florida was like, and they've done it for 2 years, where it's just endless relentlessness that it does not allow you to settle into your game. Not dissimilar from what we talked about with the way the Dallas Stars penalty kill got the Avs power play so out of whack by just the pressure was so relentless that the Avs didn't know what to do. that was what it felt like the Florida Panthers were doing to Edmonton, but for 200 feet in all situations.
Yeah, let's dig in it line by line here for a second too. The top line might be the briefest one to talk about because it's obvious why it's so good, especially with Barkov. You have a player who wins Selke and Stanley Cup now multiple seasons. Only 2 players in NHL history now have done that more than 2 seasons, or more than 1 season, I should say. And I think it's significant to note then the strong two-way play that Barkov is known for and how that translates to success, even your 1C, right? Or especially your 1C, I should say. There's so much importance then on having such a defensive-minded player that also of the skill and caliber that is Barkov. It's something that shouldn't be understated, and why I think when we see Nathan MacKinnon really lock in his own end in the playoffs in particular, that's a necessary ingredient. Like, it's necessary for MacKinnon to be a strong two-way player. If he's not, that's when the results kind of suffer. And I don't think that was the issue with MacKinnon so much in these last playoffs as it was just meeting a really great Jake Ottinger more than anything.
So we we talk a lot about obviously the greatness of Nathan MacKinnon and point totals wise, and I'm getting this pulled up here. He's dominated his draft class, and with at the time it was, is it Seth Jones? Is it Nathan MacKinnon? It ends up being Nathan MacKinnon. And then in what at the time, 2013, was a massive shock. I mean, there was audible gasps on TV. The Florida Panthers go up and take Alexander Barkov at number 2. The point totals aren't very close. Nathan MacKinnon has been far more productive season over season over the course of their career. Do we sell short the gap between Nathan MacKinnon and Alexander Barkov? Is it maybe much smaller than people give it credit for? Just Alexander Barkov's an elite 200-foot player.
Yeah, so I think it is important to acknowledge there's a gap between these players, but seeing Nate's commitment to get stronger at the faceoff dot, I think points to an awareness of not specifically Barkov in that gap, but generally the significance of a player like Barkov and why having that dimension in his game, then like, okay, maybe faceoffs actually do kind of matter a little bit. And I do need to be a strong two-way player because you're relied on so much just on the ice in almost all situations, and you're going to be taking on top matchups. And so part of containing some of the other team stars, it's going to fall heavily on Nathan MacKinnon's shoulders. That's just a reality. And so being that strong 200-foot player, it's a necessity. And it's obviously part of the formula for success. As proven by a player like Barkov, that I think that Nate has, I won't even say quietly, but has been building into that part of his game, because 2022 is where I marked such a difference in Nathan MacKinnon as a strong defensive player. I refer to them as blue-collar habits, but I didn't think he got enough credit for building that into his game so much more in the 2022 run, that I think he's been building on this for some time now. And just, it's not the kind of thing he's going to come out and broadcast.
Yeah. I just, Evan Rollo and I were texting back and forth after that game, kind of making jokes like, who's the best player from the 2013 draft? And again, I think it's MacKinnon. He's I think MacKinnon, depending on the day, is the best player in the world. But I just want to make sure that we give Alexander Barkov his flowers here and say that, I do believe Nathan MacKinnon is the best player from that draft class. I think he's a better player than Barkov, but I do not think that gap is as wide as maybe it is spoken about sometimes.
And I'll pull the lens back for a second too. Just Florida's top 6 in general has a lot of threats, but they are threats who were at a point per game or thereabout pace with 6 players who had 20 plus points. Yeah. And that's pretty significant. It's the most of any team in Stanley Cup playoff history. And when you look at the scoring struggles that Colorado's whole team suffered, but especially the top 6, there was an emphasis. It is so important to get production. I know that sounds like such an obvious, and that other player too, I say 5 of 6 of your top 6 with 20 plus points. There's Brad Marchand on the third line also just putting up ridiculous numbers. That helps too. But getting so much production out of your players, including Reinhart, who suffered a grade 2 MCL tear and had honestly had, maybe mixed results, came alive in the final. So it's not just getting players who produce, it's players who can produce at the right times. And so it's the game time impact, when the game gets tighter and the intensity gets heightened, all of these players showed up and they delivered, and the contributions were really well distributed across the board. So it wasn't just Barkov or it wasn't just Bennett, it was everybody. And I think that's why when we get to the power play in a second, this is such a crazy stat to me, but their second unit, they had 20 power play goals throughout these players. Their second playoffs, their second unit had 11. Over half of their power play goals came from their second power play unit. I think that kind of translates to why they had 5v5 success too within their top 6, that it's just that good that you basically have 2 top unit power plays on the ice at any given moment. So this is where it's hard for the Avs to replicate that specifically. One, I don't see a world where you're going to give favor to a second unit with guys like McKinnon and Makar on your first power play. But there is something to be said for where Brock Nelson, for example, and Val Nichushkin has a lot of work to do next year because it is so important for all of these guys to hit. That was what I found difficult about the Avs end of their season, is they got these assets at the deadline. They got the Coyle, they got Brock Nelson and Marty Netchus a little bit ahead of that, right? And it just didn't hit in the playoffs. And so it's like, well, they had all these bets that didn't hit, so you go home losing. That's kind of how gambling works. And so they need a lot of these guys. I don't just mean to pan out, but they have a body of work that proves they can do it. So it's really not so much of a gamble. It's just they need to start living up to these expectations. And I think a full season of Brock Nelson, I'm excited and hopeful for that.
Yeah. Did you see the tweet that was going around? I don't know who he is. Doesn't look like he's any kind of media member or anything like that. Just a fan. It says, this is on April 16th, 2014, right before the 2014 draft where the Sabres were picking high. I think they're the number 2 pick. Sam Reinhart could be an offensive star with 90-point upside. But I think Sam Bennett is a guy who will win a Conn Smythe. #Sabres.
This is incredible.
Crazy, right?
Oh, I love that.
And they both did that this year for the Florida Panthers. Thought that was pretty nuts.
I love it. So we could talk about Sam Bennett in that second line too. Honestly, what Bennett was in these playoffs, it's a career high and it's a huge step forward. 15 goals, but led the team in hits with 107 hits. It's just the way that he plays. He doesn't just establish himself at the net front. He fully takes over. He fully evicts Edmonton Oilers from their own net front, buys property, runs them out of town. And I can understand the frustration because I even watch it as a goalie appreciator, and he toes that line so well. That's a difficult thing to do because he just plays hard, and some of it he gets penalized for rightfully, but other times it's all above board. You just hate it. And that's the kind of player that honestly, like Wyatt Marchand makes so much sense on Florida too. You need a guy like that who is going to just play that gritty physical game and force himself on you at any given turn.
I loved in the Toronto series when he was getting all the heat for what I thought was a completely coincidental collision. You feel for Anthony Stolarz, who gets hurt and misses what ends up being the rest of the playoffs, but it did not look malicious to me. That was Sam Bennett going to the front of the net. And I just loved that. It was 2 days later, someone, in Toronto was asking him like, well, are you going to be more? He's like, no, if you guys are waiting for me to stop going to the front of the net, that's not going to happen. So I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm sorry. I feel bad that he got hurt, but I'm not going to change a thing about myself. And I just loved that mentality of like, I play one way. I have one gear. I'm not out here to intentionally hurt anybody, but I'm out here to win and compete. And I just love that.
No, it's true. I think a lot of Florida has this mentality. Kachuk, another player that has that, I'd say, heart and soul of a warrior, playing through a torn adductor and a hernia issue.
Yeah, tore off the bone.
Ooh.
My goodness.
And he has 3 goals and 6 points total through games 3 through 6 in the Stanley Cup final. Another player, like kind of going back to Reinhart for a second, the big moments, to have players that are able to step up and emerge, it's huge. We've had other podcasts in the past about the clutch factor and is this real? Is it meaningful? I think it's absolutely real. I think it's a mental toughness thing too, to be able to sift through the storylines of a series and understand the job that needs to be done and just execute. And players like Kachuk do that really well, Bennett really well. Rodriguez, a part of that top 6 picture too, I think has grown a lot in Florida, that I understand people maybe were left wanting after his time in Colorado. There were periods where his game could go a bit cold, especially with respect to production. But I think he is on a team that makes a lot of sense, that can paper over any of those moments and drive even more out of him, because there was a moment in game 5 on the Sam Bennett goal that put them up 2-0 where he cuts off Ekholm, escaping the Edmonton blue line, and forces a turnover, just using his body to force the threat of this. And it forced then Matthias Ekholm, one of Edmonton's best players on their back end, to turn over the puck, and it leads immediately to a goal. And I thought the speed and the hunger behind this play that was shown from Rodriguez is exactly why he's having success in Florida. And I wished he could have, had that kind of jump about him in Colorado, but I think he needed to go to that environment to see that.
Well, and for me, he did at times have that going quiet, even for Florida. Like, that's always been a,
Yes.
I don't want to use the word hallmark.
He's
that
not
feels
among
mean.
the 20-plus point players. He only had 15 points, 2 goals, 13 assists. So he was a little quieter compared to the others in the top 6.
Right. And so, he still had those moments. And I think that's what a lot of people latch onto from his time in Colorado. It was like, oh, well, he would just go quiet for long stretches. That's kind of Evan Rodriguez's game. But, to your point, he does a lot of small things well. And when he can be a piece to a team that does a lot of things well, you can live with those little stretches of him going quiet or not being as productive, because it was the same here in Colorado. He did a lot of small things well.
He
does a lot
definitely
of small
did.
things well.
He's a great teammate.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the even distribution in scoring, the way that Florida is constructed, is why it works. Is if you're not having a great night, the goals aren't coming, you have so much support around you. And I think that's one of my learning lessons in watching this series of, all right, Makar and McKinnon were really shut down against Dallas. They obviously had a game plan designed to do that. They needed more people then to step up and support. And I think a lot of players tried. I think Marty Necas, you look at the process and intent behind what he was doing. There was a lot of effort to do this.
I think it's a great call.
Nelson, Nichushkin, and then the addition of Landeskog. Someone in the chat, let's see, someone already mentioned, it's Bama Metcalf again. Great points, Bama. We're putting you on the pod. The addition of Gabe to Colorado's top 6 is where I think you start to more seriously draw the parallels then in how both of these teams are constructed at the top.
Am I missing the comment? Okay, there we go. Oh, okay. Awesome.
This is why having Gabe will be a huge pull into the fight, guy. I read that weird, but he's exactly right. I think having Gabe in that top 6 adds that kind of energy and that jump that inspired the best out of a guy like Rodriguez in Florida. I think Landeskog can inspire the best out of players like Nelson. And I think Nichushkin, what do trains run on? Coal? I think he just needs a little coal to get going on the tracks this year, because we've obviously seen better from Nichushkin in playoffs.
And we even saw better from him in the regular season. Totally. I don't know what happened to him. I'm sorry. I was a little distracted there for a second. You were talking about the injury that Kachuk played through. Did you see what Barkov played through?
Yes, the stitches weren't holding, so they just had to fully glue his hand.
I can't even imagine what it was like playing through that injury that's on the screen right now.
What's crazy to me too is this going to sound so silly, but like, oh, hands, are those important in hockey?
Right? No, honestly, like,
I have this feeling that it probably was this constant stinging pain, but it maybe he was able to just sort of put it to the background.
I mean,
temporarily.
I imagine he was getting some shots in his, to help with that as well. But
the adrenaline of it, maybe just he wasn't in the moment conscious of that stinging pain in his pain because it was so constant.
Right. This is just normal.
Yeah, this is
just
my new
baseline.
normal.
Yeah, I just when you talked about the Kachuk thing, I said I got to go find a picture of this real fast just to get thrown up here because it was and again, Bama Metcalf. My goodness, you're just on a heater today.
Just come right in here.
The broken foot that Val played through, what guys play through.
Oh yeah, the hand injuries. Because I think both Kadri and Cogliano had weird hand things going on.
Broken hands. Valenchushkin's foot, the bone looking like that.
And that one is kind of aged really sadly too, because that obviously had lasting repercussions for Val. So it's not necessarily something we're sitting here and celebrating that players do.
For everybody to do, but I'm just saying, like it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Like there's so much that these guys put themselves through, to try to accomplish. That's why, like when I watch them go celebrate for a week, it's like you should.
You earned that.
You earned
big
that,
fella.
You earned that.
I agree, and that's why too. I just can't sit here and ever criticize the Avs for a lack of effort.
No.
That is never where my head goes when they don't get the results that they want.
You'll never hear me say that a guy doesn't care or that they aren't trying. You just won't ever hear me say that.
All right. I'm excited to talk about the third line. I almost I think this is the reason I even wanted to do this podcast is how much I love Florida's third line.
Yeah.
So I was trying to think of what it is about the way that they attack when they're on the ice. That how I would describe it. And I found myself looking up how hyenas hunt. All right, listen to this, you guys. They rely on their numbers to overwhelm prey. Yeah. Hyenas employ a strategy of surrounding and mobbing their prey using a combination of snapping, biting, and mobbing tactics. Is that not Florida's third line?
I was going to say, because hyenas are pretty ineffective hunters by themselves.
Is that not the third line? It's the combination of what each of them do and how they lean on each other to create plays. Like there was a moment in Game 5, it was the Kachuk goal. Lundell forced a turnover and then got himself to the net front to simultaneously act as a screen shortly after this. And it was Luostarinen who had patience to get the pass to Kachuk. And just by design, like you have to play the body, get the turnover, then get yourself to the net. It's so calculated step by step, like getting themselves in the right place. And they're not even the one who intends to score the goal, but they know that these actions will lead to the highest good. And Luostarinen, a player that stood out on this line for his physicality. I don't know if I was with you when I said that this is what Kiviranta wants to be.
Yeah.
Because it's effective checking that gets them possession of the puck, gets guys off puck who need to be. And it helps to set up some of these plays like the one I just described with Anton Lundell.
As you were just describing that, not that I don't love your hyena metaphor.
You have a new animal.
But I do. As you were describing, did you watch, it's really prominent in the first Jurassic Park. Have you ever seen the original Jurassic Park movie?
Yes. Oh, the raptors.
The raptors. How they talk about they hunt as a pack. And it's all about distraction tactics.
I love it.
That you'll see the one that's straight ahead, and that's where you think, but the attack is actually going to come from the side.
I love this.
And so you get drawn into, okay, I've got to handle it. And then there's the great scene that once things have started to go wrong, where he's got his eyes on the one that he thinks he's got the jump on, and he starts to load the gun. And right as he pulls it up to look down the scope, that one raptor just comes from like 2 inches away from him and is just staring at him. And he says, "Clever girl." And then he dies. Like, that's it. They get him. And as you're describing that, like the Lundell makes the play and then he makes play here. Then suddenly he's at the front of the net providing the screen. That was what came to my mind of like,
good.
Right where you think you know where it's coming from. Now they got you and it's actually coming from over here and it's in the back of your net.
They're overwhelming because I haven't even mentioned Brad Marchand in all of this, who we all know is a rat. So like we've got a hyena, a raptor, and a rat on a line together, and somehow it works. But this is important for the Avs because we've obviously identified the issue with the third line, and we saw why having a good third line in the 2022 run for the Avs was important. We see now proof of concept with Florida's third line, why it is important too to have a little bit of something different represented. Like the skill is obviously important. And I think each of the players has to have enough skill to keep up with each other, but you are going to need the guy that uses his body to distract, create time and space, force turnovers, and at different times, that role is going to rotate too. Different players are going to be that guy. It just has to be overwhelming. And that's why it was difficult for Edmonton to contain them, because lines 1 through 3, really hard to play against, but also the fourth line too. So just really love the construction of this. And the addition of Brad Marchand is what sets it over the edge. To have a player like that available for your third line, when we talk about Charlie Coyle as a luxury, that's a luxury.
Yeah, absolutely. They were... that was what set them apart. And then again, we talked about it in the lead up to the deadline. Like Brad Marchand, he's 37, he's not done. And he made some electric plays in the Stanley Cup final.
Wallman.
All right. Okay. We have to talk about Jake Wallman.
You said he was grittying all over the ice. Is that because of what Brad Marchand did to him that you said that?
Megan, I cannot stand this dude.
This is a Jake Wallman hate podcast.
Yeah. Jake Wallman hate cast starting right now. This guy has driven me nuts since the first time he did with that fucking gritty after scoring a shootout. It's you score 5 goals a year. What are you doing out here? He's constantly dancing, constantly throwing it in guys' faces. And then in that, I think it was game 4, running his mouth nonstop. The Panthers' fourth line was on the ice for a goal against. And as they were skating off the ice while he was waiting for McDavid or whoever to come through the fist bump line, he's yelling at AJ Greer and all those fourth liners oh, this is your fault. This is on you. He scored the fourth goal in that game for Edmonton to take the lead. And before he goes to the fist bump line, he skates all the way by Florida's bench, talking. And it's just one of those things where that is one of those moments where it's boy, oh boy, you better be confident. And then he got clowned for the next 2 games. And I hope that everyone on that Florida Panthers bench come on, dance for us. Let's see it. Let's see those dance moves. I haven't heard from you in a while. Where are you? He's an undersized, average defenseman at best who puts 5 to 7 goals in the back of the net every year. And he skates around like he's Connor McDavid. And it drives me absolutely nuts. Him getting walked by Marchand in game 6 couldn't have happened to a better guy.
I don't feel as passionately about this as you do, but it just light bulb moment. Evan Bouchard, his shortcomings were terribly exposed in this cup final. And I feel for him too. I want to be in his corner, but not as intensely as you don't like Wallman. I'm not sure I can get there with Evan Bouchard being a top defenseman because his game is not close to where it needs to be to justify that.
And I think people get caught up in the hype of Evan Bouchard because he can rip that puck from the blue line. And he is an offensive threat, but he just doesn't have that same, like you said, he got horribly exposed in the cup final.
Yeah.
This is not a number 1D. He's a really good defenseman. He's going to get a lot of money. He produces like crazy from the blue line. He's not your number 1 anchor to get you to a Stanley Cup.
What frustrates me about him is it's obvious where his game needs to improve and get stronger. And I think he did take strides, but I just hope he continues with a commitment to rounding out his game for his personal success. Because right now Edmonton's in trouble. We can have a separate Edmonton pod, but I'm not sure the direction of this team past this year.
I've been dying to talk about Jake Wallman ever since game 4.
Glad.
And you said his name and I was all right, we're pausing this entire podcast for me to bitch.
No, I love it. I didn't know you felt this way about him.
So let me also lay something else out here. Because we just talked about Evan Bouchard, not being a number 1 defenseman. And like you said, we can do a different, I want to talk more about the Oilers next week.
Maybe even Monday.
But Megan, you can make the argument that, hey, they got right there 2 years in a row. Last year was a crazy final that saw them fall behind 3-0 and then rally in a crazy way to push it to 7. That series on the whole felt similar to how all of these games individually felt this season, or this final. The last 4 seasons, the Edmonton Oilers have lost in the playoffs to the eventual Cup champion. Obviously, the last 2 years they've lost in the finals to the Cup champion. And really, I thought this year, the back half of that final, Florida really outclassed them. Edmonton didn't. They didn't really look all that close. Last year, like I said, they fall behind 3-0 before making this miraculous comeback, high wire act. Season before that, they got kind of spanked by the Vegas Golden Knights in the second round, who go on to win the Cup. And then we all remember season before that, they get swept, giving up 22 goals in just 4 games by the Colorado Avalanche. I do wonder if there is a little bit of a false sense of where this team is at, because when they have come up against the team that does win the Cup, they have not looked particularly close to me in any of the last 4 seasons. We can talk more about them next week, but I just want to put that out there because I'm sure there are going to be people that hear like, what do you mean Evan Bouchard's not a number 1 defenseman? He just got his team within 2 wins of a Cup and 1 win last year. I think there's a lot of context here. I don't think they're actually playing against these Cup winning teams all that effectively.
I think so too, because I think they deserve a little credit for the Western Conference final against Dallas and exposing Dallas
100%.
The frauds that they are. I'm just kidding. Not dramatic about this,
but the lack of offense that we saw, those cracks starting to show in the Dallas Stars from round 1, and you're 100% right. They deserve massive credit for exposing them on that. Totally.
But they really didn't look like they could hang with Florida.
No.
And they were on borrowed time in this Cup final. All right, quick fourth line conversation.
Yep.
You want to talk about AJ Greer?
Well, so I just this was a player that I knew that Avs fans were gonna
wait a minute
feel a certain way about. And look, I was someone that during AJ Greer's time in Colorado, I was really frustrated with, because we'd see him in the American League, we'd see him at camp and all, and it's like, yeah, this guy looks like an NHL player. He's an above a point per game player in the American Hockey League. He's got great, instincts and finish around the net. And I wanted to draw the parallel to Matt Steinberg and something to learn, because I believe it was Bama Metcalf even earlier said, Matt Steinberg reminds me of one of the Florida Panthers 4th line guys. And to me, I can see the line that you can draw between him and AJ Greer. And I think one of the issues AJ Greer had when he was in Colorado and New Jersey and Boston and Calgary was he struggled to learn how to play in control of that role as a 4th line energy grinder type. I always felt like he struggled making that transition from point producer, PP1, first line, penalty kill, does everything, to playing your role. And I think about what Brian Wilsey told you at the beginning of last year of like, our job is to get guys ready to play in the NHL. And hey, guess what? Maybe you're a scorer. Maybe you're a top line scoring wing for the Colorado Eagles. The Avs might need a 4th line grinder. And our job is, the Eagles' job is to prepare guys that we're going to send you up there to play whatever role is needed. And I always felt like AJ Greer struggled to do that. He'd play out of control. He'd take dumb penalties. He'd find himself around the net doing just dumb things. Again, putting the Avs in bad spots. And I wondered if he would ever figure out how to channel that in the right way. And I was really happy for him as those last few seconds ticked off the clock and he was on the ice. I was really happy for him because I said, he figured it out. It took him 5 NHL teams, a lot of stints up and down, AHL, NHL, a lot of healthy scratches. He played 81 games this year for the Florida Panthers and was a key part of their run in the postseason. He figured it out. And you look at a guy like Matt Steinberg, going all the way back to the beginning of this conversation, you can look at this Florida Panther 4th line and AJ Greer specifically and say, that's the model. That's what I've got to get to. I've got to figure out how to play with energy, play intensely, but within control and effectively. And I'm really happy for AJ Greer. We saw him here as a young player. He's a great dude. He's got a great story. His family and the way he tries to give back to the community and stuff like that. He's gotten himself in some trouble a couple times, no doubt about it. But I was just happy for him. That was a guy who really on the ice overcame a lot.
Couple things. Classy move from Paul Maurice to get that fourth line on the ice in the final seconds, because this fourth line did pave a huge path forward for Florida in the Toronto series specifically.
Between Maurice and that fourth line.
Yes.
Chills.
They earned it. It's such an intentional coach. I want to give Paul Maurice his flowers for that nod to the work that they put in, getting them to this point in the playoffs, especially coming out of that Toronto series. You look at this fourth line on the whole. Greer, 6'3", Nosek, 6'2", Gadjevich, 6'2", big guys. And you look at the top three in hits per 60 on the Florida Panthers team, and it's that entire fourth line. And you look at maybe like the early returns of Parker Kelly, Logan O'Connor, Jack Drury, top guys, hits per 60, and limited minutes for this fourth line on Florida. Makes a lot of sense that they're going to kind of want to run that top nine that obviously was really impactful. We've already talked about, but in the limited time that this fourth line had, players like AJ Greer found ways to be effective, and Nosek, a really key player on their penalty kill. And so their duties were beyond just what the fourth line required of them. And the Greer call out is really interesting to me. And I want to talk about a conversation I had with someone on the development side a couple years back. I was talking about the development track of a different player with respect to maturity. This was a player that had some growing up to do. And they actually referenced AJ Greer as a player who came to Colorado with a lot of room to grow in terms of maturing as a player. And this was not framed as a bad thing. It was framed as sort of this necessary diagnosis for Greer to become the player that he is today. It was hard. There was sometimes, this attitudinal gap between the two. Like, you need to be this. And I don't know that it fully clicked for him in the beginning. And so I think he needed to experience some losses along the way to realize just how important this maturity as a person, as a player, was for him getting to where he is now, a Stanley Cup champion. And so when people maybe reflect on why couldn't they have gotten this version of AJ Greer here in Colorado, it's because the AJ Greer that exists today only exists because of the version that existed here in Colorado. And it's really special to see that growth is possible at every stage of a player's career. I look at the year that Parker Kelly had and the steps forward that he took as, an older player. The growth can happen past being a bona fide prospect. And I think that's going to be really necessary for players like Steinberg, who are kind of an untraditional prospect now, getting a little bit older. He's maybe aging out of what you'd consider a prospect, but the room for growth and the potential for it is always there. And I love pointing to Greer as a model that Steinberg could look to kind of specifically.
It's now I will say, I do think the fourth line at the Avs had this year, they didn't have that size, but I do think that they had the Energizer Bunny. What's the word I'm looking for here? I think they had the jam to be that kind of fourth line for the Avs this year, had they been able to go deep. But hey,
I bring up the size because I was like, oh wow, these are all big guys.
Big boys,
But I agree. I don't think that the Avs fourth line with a Drury, O'Connor, and a Kelly can't be effective just because they're a little bit smaller. I don't think that will hold them back. It certainly didn't, just from a checking point of view.
Right.
And there were times where that was exploited by Dallas in a way that I didn't really love, but they weathered it and they just continued to stay on their game. And I think that's why I have the least criticism of the Avs fourth line. Like, that feels, with a healthy Logan O'Connor, of course, that feels like the best, not best, that's dramatic, but one of my favorite parts of the team next year.
It's something that you can tell that they are going to try to put focus on keeping intact. And again, not only the Avs experience underscoring the importance of it, but what we just saw from the Florida Panthers underscoring the importance of having that.
And I know we're running a little bit long, so we can breeze through defense really quickly.
Mhm.
Honestly, thankfully, with a Makar and a Taves on the Avs, they're in a pretty good spot year by year when you've got those guys as options. But I think something that Florida does really well each year, and I keep thinking to myself, they can't keep getting away with this, is finding good guys to round out the bottom of their decor. And I think they've continued to do that. They obviously paid for Seth Jones to be a part of their full back end picture, but it does make a difference to kind of invest in a top four that you can believe in and count on. And so I think for the Avs, when we're having this conversation, it's more so get clear on the future of Josh Manson, get clear on the future of Sam Girard. Is this your top four that you're running with, or do you need to invest in bolstering that?
Yeah. And figure out what your options are with a guy like Ryan Lindgren, who I thought was very effective in the bottom part of that decor.
Right.
I think that's a great call out, Megan. You've got a top two, set and forget. No questions asked.
Easy.
Make sure you got a solid top four, and then give yourself, something that you feel comfortable with on the bottom pair.
Yes, don't punt on the bottom pair, because I think the Avs have taken some liberties with that part of the lineup, and it does hurt them in the end. So it's still important, like maybe, a Lindgren who was kind of flexing in second pair, third pair role. So they're paying a bit of money for that, but it was really important for them to have Lindgren as an option. So I think that will be the important thing. What was interesting too about Florida's back end is they combined for 18 goals, tied for the fifth most by defensemen by a Stanley Cup winning team. And so when we talk about offense running through Colorado's back end with players like Makar, Taves, I think it's sneakily a part of Florida's team as well. It's not maybe a show stopping, but it's important that they have defensemen that can step up and contribute and have the puck skill to hang with the talent of their forward group. And thankfully, I don't think that's really an Avs problem, because this is by design how they exist as a team. But it is important to kind of weigh all of these things together, because I think that Florida has a really good balance of all of it.
Yeah. No, I agree. And goaltending, the Avs obviously have set. But the one thing I was going to say from goaltending is you could tell Vitek Vanacek and Sergei Bobrovsky had a great relationship. I think the Avs have that as well with Wedge and Blackwood. Florida's the model franchise right now. No doubt about it. The way that everything, roster construction, how they treat their players, how their coaches interact with their guys, having a captain like Barkov. Also, by the way, I've never seen any other team do it. Loved the cup celebration, kind of treated it like the way that they do for World Juniors, where he took the cup and went into the pile of all the players so everyone could touch it first before Barkov took his lap. Like, I just loved it. They are the franchise to emulate right now. No doubt about it.
Also, just a shout out to Gustav Forsling. He is a premier defenseman, and his ability to shut down teams, contain a Connor McDavid, and his high IQ to the way in which he defends. He will use every tool in his toolkit, and he has many to block lanes, take away shooting, passing lanes. I love Gustav Forsling. Just wanted to give him a shout out before we're done here for the day.
I love shouting.
Jake Wallman.
Oh, gosh.
Get him riled up again. I think that was it. Really excited about goaltending with the Avs going into next season. I think Bobrovsky has experience, like he had a shaky start to these playoffs, and then he locked it down for the remainder of it. And that's kind of all the Avs need, all they can ask for. And I'm excited for a full year of Mackenzie Blackwood. I think that this is a player that is already kind of intense. Maybe we don't talk about it enough, like in the way we talk about McKinnon being intense. Mackenzie Blackwood is also very intense, very, very competitive.
Yep.
And I'm excited to see that translate to a deeper playoff run in the future.
Isn't it funny? Geez Louise, I cannot believe it has already been 7 years since Bobrovsky signed that extension. He's entering the last year of that, not an extension, a free agent deal. He's entering the last year of that $10 million per season contract that the Panthers gave him, that for a long time people were really, really critical of. That's going to ruin that franchise, da-da-da-da-da, and they'd pay that over and over and over again at this point.
Well, that is all I have for today.
That's
We've
all I
already
got.
gone a little bit long, but I'm sure as the off season goes on, we can kind of talk about where the Avs have strengths, existing strengths that already kind of parallel some of what Florida does well. I think we kind of breezed over like, well, the Avs do have a McKinnon and a Makar and a Taves.
Totally.
And so they're sitting pretty as far as some of this is concerned, just a couple areas to tweak or beef up. So I'm excited to dig more into that as the off season goes on and we get closer to the start of camp.
Yes.
We've got Dev Camp coming up soon too.
Woo! Draft
So
next week.
we'll start talking hockey. Yeah, draft next week should be huge. Should be
Can't
huge
wait for both of those picks.
for the Avs. Well, that about does it for today.
Yep.
Do we need to give thanks to anybody?
No, we're good for today.
All right, that sounds awesome. Meghan Angley, Jesse Montano, Gorilla Sports Off Ice. We'll be back on Monday.
We do need to give thanks to John, though. John
and
back there.
John
Yeah.
behind the board helping to run this show, make it look and sound good, even when I say things like shotting, which is not a word.
Do
But
whatever you want it to be.
I'm allowed. I'm allowed. We'll see you guys on Monday. We'll be talking Edmonton Oilers.
See ya.
Bye.